Help support Name Explained by liking this video, leaving a comment and subscribing to the channel. I always find it awesome when a name becomes so much bigger than it was initially conceived to be, with this happening due to when the name of somewhere small is applied somewhere way bigger than it, cementing that name with the bigger place, with the smaller place having that name initially being something of a curiosity. A great example of this is with New Zealand. I think to most people when they hear the name Zealand, the land of kiwis and sheep will most likely come to mind. However, this is the New Zealand, with the old Zealand, this New Zealand being named after being located in the Netherlands, making the land of just Zealand something of a curious, meaning when you hear it, it makes you go, huh, this must be the old Zealand that New Zealand is named after. Well, it did for me anyway when I was in Zealand, and it sparked the idea for making a video about it. We also see this with things like Old York and New York, which yes I know isn't named after the city of York but the Duke of York, and even Venice and Venezuela. However, these are rather big examples of this. Whole cities and areas of nations being named after huge things like cities and even countries. Today, however, we're going to be looking at this happening on our planet on a much smaller scale, and it doesn't really get much smaller than some small islands being named after an even smaller Scottish village, with these islands being none other than the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands are located in the South Atlantic Ocean, around 400 miles off the southeast coast of South America, with their nearest neighbours being the country of Argentina. The whole area consists of around 740 islands and islets, with the two largest islands being primarily where the residents of the island live, with there being just over 3,000 residents of the island, which is really quite a small population. However, despite the small amount of people they make up for with their sheep population, with one source saying there are 160 sheep per person. And of course, on the Falkland Islands, penguins are aplenty. There are more penguins than humans on these islands, with there being 5 different species, including rockhoppers, Magellanic, macaroni, king, and even the world's largest population of Gentoo penguins. If you prefer penguins to people, and let's face it, who doesn't, then relocating to the Falkland Islands might really be a good option for you. The total landmass of the islands are 4,700 square miles, which is roughly half the size of Wales. The capital of the island is called Stanley, named after the colonial secretary of the day Edward Geoffrey Smith Stanley, which reminds me of the capital of the Isle of Man, which is just called Douglas. In all honesty, everywhere should have capital cities with simple human given names. Imagine being in an airport and saying I'm flying from Bill to Ian with a stopover at Keith. The islands have had a turbulent history with ownership. Many nations have laid claim to the island, there being British, Argentine, Spanish and even French settlements on the island in the past. However, the islands are mainly being contested over the British and Argentines. They were first discovered by Europeans in 1690. The British first settled there in 1765. However, by 1820, Argentina proclaimed they owned the Falklands. This push and pull between the two nations came to a head in 1833, when the British expelled remaining Argentine officials from the island, claiming it for the United Kingdom. Though the Argentines were not happy with this, and this came to a breaking point over 100 years later in 1982, when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, which prompted the Falklands War between the United Kingdom and Argentina, a 10-week war that led to Britain solidifying their rule on the island. And as of today, the islands are still under British rule, with it seeming like that won't change anytime soon. In fact, in 2013, a referendum was held on the island as to whether they wanted to remain a British overseas territory, with the people of the Falkland Island voting overwhelmingly to remain as one. 99.8% voted to remain part of the UK. There were literally just 3 votes against it. In fact, let's talk about the residents of the Falkland Islands for a moment, shall we? The official language of the island is English, but due to the isolation of the island, the language has changed over time to become its own variation of English called Falkland Islands English. And of course, we have to look into the name of these people, which is unsurprisingly Falkland Islanders. And while that name may not actually be that interesting, there's actually a couple nicknames that Falkland Islanders have gone by too, along the same lines of how New Zealanders are known as Kiwis and Canadians are known as Canucks, with one of these being Kelpers. This name comes from the fact that much of the island's shores are surrounded by kelp, a kind of seaweed. Though I also read that in modern times this name is used far less often and is even considered offensive, so huge apologies if anyone was offended by that. A more curious name for Falkland Islanders is Bennies. This name derives from the time of the Falklands War. British soldiers saw the woolen hats the islanders wore and it reminded them of Benny Hawkins, a character in the popular British show of the time Crossroads. Anyway, let's get back to the names of the actual islands themselves. The name Falkland was actually given to the water between the two main islands first before it was attached to the islands themselves. This strait of water is called the Falkland Sound. This name was given to this body of water by English sailor John Strong, which is a fantastic name. He came across this strait and the islands either side of it on his voyage from London to South America in 1690. He named it the Falkland Sound, and then the island to the west of the sound became West Falkland, and the island to the east of the sound became East Falkland, unsurprisingly, collectively becoming the Falkland Islands. However, this leads to another question. Where exactly did John Strong, I just can't get over how good that name is, get this name of Falkland from to begin with? Well, Mr. Johnny Strong named this island in honour of the Treasure of the Navy at the time, and the man who sponsored the trip, Anthony Carey, who was the 5th Viscount of Falkland, with this Falkland, of course, being a tiny village all the way up in Scotland. And if you thought the Falkland Islands themselves had a small population, then prepare yourself, as the village of Falkland in Scotland has a population of just over 1,000 people. This means you could fit everyone who lives in the Falkland Islands and everyone who lives in Falkland, Scotland into one football stadium and have plenty of room to spare. In fact, I wonder if anyone from the Falkland Islands have ever visited Falkland, Scotland, or vice versa. If you happen to be that person, please let me know. Though I want pictorial evidence too. I haven't been to this village of Falkland myself either, but from what I can see online, it seems very much like your small, pretty British village, full of church spires, cobbled streets, little shops, a pub or two, and of course surrounded by the British countryside. It's also home to the oldest real tennis court in the world, which opened in 1539 and was built for King James V of Scotland. And this real tennis sport is the predecessor to modern tennis, though it is still played by people. Anyway, real tennis has little to do with names. While we know the Falkland Islands were named after Falkland, Scotland, how did this village receive this name? Well, we aren't 100% sure on that. A popular but untrue theory is that it means Falcon Land, though as cool as this name is, it's not thought to be the case. So this Falcon etymology for Falkland is simply a folk tale. An etymology with more theory behind it is that it comes from the Gaelic Falach, meaning hidden / concealed, thought to refer to a hill which is now called Falkland Hill that lies behind the village that hides and conceals the settlement. Though while we may not know this for sure, it was this name of Falkland that was applied to these islands in the Atlantic Ocean, and now that name, which initiated with a tiny village in Scotland, is known across the globe, much like with Zealand and York. I like to imagine there have been people trekking across Scotland who have come across this village and thought how interesting it is that it shares its name with the Falkland Islands, though not knowing the Falkland Islands have this tiny village and its Viscount to thank for their own name. And speaking of the Viscount of Falkland, while it may have been named in honour of the 5th Viscount, we are now on our 15th Viscount, Lucius Carey, 15th Viscount of Falklands, and he shares his name with the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, 7th, 10th, 13th and 14th Viscounts of Falkland, and his son who will become the 16th Viscount of Falkland is too called Lucius. He is also a writer and producer working on TV series like Taken, Homeland and Lie to Me, which isn't what I expected to find out when I started to make this video. However, while a lot of people know them as the Falkland Islands, this isn't the only name they are known by. The country closest to the Falkland Islands is Argentina. Of course, Argentina speaks Spanish, so this means that the islands have Spanish names too. In Spanish, the islands are collectively known as Malvinas, with East Falkland being called Isla Soledad and West Falkland being called Gran Malvina. The Spanish name of Malvinas comes from the French name of the island, Malouins, which derives from the French city of Saint Malo, which of course is named after the saint called Malo. The French named it after this city as the residents of Saint Malo who sailed to the island to try and inhabit it. While the French no longer seem to have any claim on the island, their name for it lives on, well, at least in the Spanish name for the islands. West Falkland's Spanish name of Gran Malvina means Great Malvina, which is odd as actually the smaller of the two biggest islands, while the name of East Falkland in Spanish, Isla Soledad, translates to Loneliness Island, which must be due to the isolation the island has from the rest of the world, though funnily enough East Falkland is actually the more inhabited of the two, containing the aforementioned capital of Stanley, so the one with loneliness in its name is actually the more populated one, and the one with great in its name is actually the smaller one. Is it just me, or should these Spanish names of the islands be mixed around? However, you may have noticed that the Falkland Islands Spanish name sounded somewhat similar to the name of another island nation on this planet of ours. I'm of course referring to the Maldives, nestled within the Indian Ocean. While their names aren't as similar as say Paraguay and Uruguay or Austria and Australia, I still have to wonder if there's any connection between the two, and the short answer is no. The name Maldives is thought to derive from the Sanskrit Maladvipa, which means garland of islands, and this is because the islands that make up the Maldives are somewhat garland shaped. So while these names of Malvinas and Maldives may not be related, the English name of the Falkland Islands is connected to a quaint village in Scotland, which in all honesty is one of the last things I would have expected. The Falklands / Malvinas and the Maldives were suggested by Pedro Marcelino Figueroa, and thanks to their suggestion, they will now be honoured as Name Explain's patron saint of the Falklands / Malvinas and the Maldives. Do you have a good idea for somewhere that name could be covered in a Name Explain video? If so, then please consider donating on Patreon. Just $1 a month helps keep the channel running and earns you a weekly chance to suggest somewhere to be turned into a video, and you too could be a Name Explain Patreon saint. Thank you to all my patrons who support NameXplain on a monthly basis. NameXplain depends on small monthly donations from fans like you to help keep the channel running. Just a small amount of $2 a month helps in a huge way, grants you patron exclusive NameXplain extras, and gets your name here with all these awesome people. Thank you. Hello all, and thank you so much for reaching the end of this video. Stick around and check out another video, and subscribe to update on all things NameXplain. You can follow myself on Twitter at NameXplainYT. Follow me there and tweet the name Maggie at me so I know you came from this message. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.